I need to tell you something that's been eating at me for months now. 9 years. That's how long I thought I had a real marriage, a real partnership. Turns out I was living in a carefully constructed lie, and the worst part? Everyone around me knew it except me. My name doesn't matter much to this story, but what matters is that I trusted completely. I was the kind of wife who believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt, who thought love meant overlooking the small things that bothered you. God, was I naive. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. When I married him, I knew about her, the ex-girlfriend from college. They'd dated for 3 years before breaking up, and when he told me they'd remained friends, I actually admired it. How mature, I thought. How evolved. Most people can't maintain friendships with their exes. But here was my husband, showing what a good person he was by staying connected to someone who'd been important in his life. She was always just there. Not obviously, not in a way that would raise immediate red flags. A birthday wish on Facebook here, a group photo from his family gatherings there. His mother would mention her casually. Oh, you know how close she was to the family? And I'd nod along, playing the understanding wife. The first time I met her was at his cousin's wedding, about 6 months after we got married. She hugged him a beat too long, her hand lingering on his arm as she laughed at something he said. I watched from across the room, telling myself I was being paranoid. She was petite and blonde. Everything I wasn't. I'm tall, brunette, more serious by nature. When she introduced herself to me, her smile was perfect, her voice sweet as honey. I've heard so much about you, she said, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. I'm so happy he found someone. The phrasing stuck with me. Not, I'm so happy for you both, or, I'm so happy you found each other. She was happy he found someone, like she was his concerned friend, genuinely pleased that he'd settled down with someone suitable. Over the years, I started noticing the pattern. Family barbecues where she'd show up with a casserole. I was in the neighborhood anyway. Holiday gatherings where she'd help his mother in the kitchen while I sat in the living room with the men, feeling like a guest in what should have been my extended family. Birthday parties for his nephews where she'd already know which games they wanted to play, which snacks they preferred. She's practically family, his sister would say with a laugh, and everyone would nod in agreement. Including me, because what else could I do? Object? Seem jealous and insecure? The thing that bothered me most was how comfortable she was. Not just with him, but with his entire family. She knew where his mother kept the good silverware. She remembered his father's coffee preferences. She had inside jokes with his siblings that dated back years before I came into the picture. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started feeling like the outsider looking in on their real family unit. The one that included her, had always included her, and tolerated me as an addition, but not really as a replacement. I told myself I was overthinking things. Marriage takes time, I reasoned. Building relationships with in-laws is a process. Just because she had a head start didn't mean anything sinister was happening. But late at night, when my husband was asleep beside me, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder why she was still so present in our lives. Why his family lit up when she walked into a room in a way they never quite did for me. Why I always felt like I was auditioning for a role that someone else had already been cast in. 9 years, I kept telling myself everything was fine. 9 years of swallowing my discomfort, of being the mature, understanding wife who didn't make waves about her husband's friendship with his ex. Until that one night when I couldn't pretend anymore. It was his nephew's graduation party that broke something inside me. Not during the party. I wasn't even there. That was the problem. His sister called on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner. I could hear the excitement in her voice as she talked about the graduation celebration they were planning for the weekend. Her son had just finished college, and the whole family was gathering at the lake house to celebrate. "We're so excited," she gushed. "It's going to be such a special day. The whole family will be there." I stirred the pasta sauce, already mentally planning what to bring, what to wear. "That sounds wonderful. What time should we arrive Saturday?" The pause on the other end was so long I thought the call had dropped. "Oh," she finally said, her voice suddenly careful. "Actually, we're having a bit of a space issue this year. The lake house is packed to capacity, and we just can't accommodate everyone." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Accommodate everyone? You know how it is. Cousins coming in from out of state. Grandparents need the accessible room. The kids are doubled up everywhere. Mom's been stressed about the logistics for weeks. "Of course," I said automatically, though my mind was spinning. The lake house wasn't small. I'd been there before. Maybe I could help with setup or cleanup. "I don't mind commuting back and forth." "That's so sweet of you to offer, but honestly, It's better if it's just close family this time. You understand, right? These college graduations only happen once. Just close family. The words hit me like a physical blow. After 9 years of marriage, I wasn't close family. I was the space issue. Of course I understand, I heard myself saying. These things happen. When my husband got home that night, I waited for him to bring it up. I kept expecting him to say something about the awkward phone call. Maybe to express frustration that I couldn't come. Perhaps to suggest we skip the party altogether in solidarity. He didn't mention it at all. Your sister called, I finally said while we were getting ready for bed. Oh yeah? About what? The graduation party. Apparently there's no room for me this year. He paused in the middle of brushing his teeth. Really? That's weird. The lake house is pretty big. That's what I thought. I watched his face in the bathroom mirror, looking for some sign that he found this as strange as I did. He rinsed his mouth and shrugged. Well, family stuff can get complicated. You know how my mom gets about having enough beds for everyone. So you're still going without me? I mean, it's my nephew's graduation. I can't really miss it. There it was. He couldn't miss it, but my absence was perfectly acceptable. Expected, even. Right, I said quietly. That Saturday, I sat in our empty house while my husband drove 3 hours to celebrate with his family. The house felt enormous and silent around me. I tried to keep busy, cleaned out closets, reorganized the kitchen cabinets, caught up on shows I'd been meaning to watch. But every task felt hollow, like I was playing house in my own life. Around lunchtime, I found myself scrolling through social media, though I told myself I wasn't looking for anything specific. Just mindless browsing to pass the time. But I was lying to myself. I was looking for photos from the party. I was looking for proof of what I already suspected, that somehow, miraculously, space had been found for other people who weren't technically immediate family. I didn't find anything at first. His family wasn't big on social media, and the few photos that appeared showed generic group shots of people I recognized. Everyone smiling and raising glasses in celebration. I should have stopped looking. I should have closed the app, made myself lunch, continued with my day of productive solitude. Instead, I kept scrolling, kept searching hashtags, kept checking story updates. That's when I saw it. A story post from his youngest cousin, the one who was always documenting everything. A quick video panning across the lake house deck, catching everyone in their natural, unguarded moments. And there she was. Not just present, but clearly comfortable and integrated into the celebration. She was wearing a sundress I'd never seen before, her blonde hair catching the sunlight as she laughed at something someone had said. She was holding a drink that matched everyone else's, standing in the family circle like she belonged there, like she'd never left. I stared at the phone screen until the story moved on to the next post. Then I watched it again, and again. The space issue hadn't been about space at all. It had been about making room for the right people. And after 9 years of marriage, I wasn't one of them. But she was. The story disappeared after 24 hours, but the image was burned into my memory. I spent the rest of Saturday in a strange, detached state, going through the motions of normal life while my mind raced. By Sunday morning, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe she'd been invited last minute. Maybe there really had been a space issue that got resolved. But I needed to know for sure. I opened Instagram again and started searching more systematically. His sister's account, his mother's rarely used profile, cousins I barely knew but had connected with over the years. Most of them were private, but a few had public posts or stories I could access. That's when I found the evidence I didn't want to find. His nephew's girlfriend had posted a series of photos from the weekend, professional-looking shots that clearly documented the entire celebration. I scrolled through them with growing disbelief, my coffee getting cold on the kitchen counter as I absorbed what I was seeing. There she was in photo after photo, not hiding in the background or captured accidentally. She was front and center in family group shots. She was sitting at the main dinner table, right between his mother and sister. She was in the kitchen helping prepare food, wearing an apron I recognized as belonging to my mother-in-law. She was holding his infant niece during the cake cutting, looking completely natural and at ease. But it was the casual moments that broke my heart. Her hand on his father's shoulder as she leaned in to hear something he was saying. Her sharing a joke with his brother while they cleaned up dinner plates. Her standing with the other women of the family, holding a wine glass and laughing at something his sister had said. She wasn't a guest at this party. She was family participating in a family celebration. The family I thought I'd married into 9 years ago. I screenshotted everything. Every photo, every angle, every moment that proved she'd been there, integrated and welcome, while I sat alone in my house being understanding about space limitations. The most devastating photo was the last one in the series. A candid shot taken during sunset, when everyone was relaxed and unguarded. She was sitting on the deck railing, and my husband was standing next to her, close enough that their shoulders were touching. His hand was resting on the railing right beside her leg, and they were both looking out at the lake with expressions I'd never seen on his face when he was with me. Comfortable, peaceful, like they were exactly where they belonged. I stared at that photo for 20 minutes, studying every detail. The way she leaned slightly toward him, the way he stood in that protective, intimate pose, the way everyone else in the background continued their conversations, completely unfazed by this moment of closeness between them. Because of course they were unfazed. This was normal. This was how it had always been. I was the aberration. I was the disruption to their natural family dynamic. My phone buzzed with a text from my husband. Heading home now. Had such a great time. Wish you could have been there. I almost laughed at the cruelty of it. He wished I could have been there. While standing intimately close to his ex-girlfriend, while she helped his mother in the kitchen, while she held his niece and sat at the family table in the spot that should have been mine. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I opened a new browser window and started searching for hotels in the mountains, 3 hours in the opposite direction from the lake house. The same area where we'd honeymooned 9 years ago, where I'd felt so hopeful about building a life with this man. I found a beautiful resort with a spa, the kind of place that cost more for one night than we usually spent on entertainment in a month. I made a reservation for the coming weekend, just for me. Then I took a screenshot of the booking confirmation and sent it to my husband with a simple message. Wish you could be here. I turned off my phone and ran a hot bath. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. Not what was expected of me, not what would keep the peace, not what would make me seem like the mature, understanding wife. Just what I wanted. It felt revolutionary. The silence that followed my text was deafening. I'd turned my phone back on Monday morning, expecting to find a dozen missed calls and frantic text messages. Instead, there was nothing. Radio silence until almost noon, when he finally responded with, "We need to talk when I get home." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What's wrong?" Not even, "Why did you book a hotel?" Just, "We need to talk." I spent that day in a strange state of calm I hadn't experienced in years. Everything felt crystal clear, like I'd been looking at my life through a dirty window and someone had finally cleaned it. I went to work, handled my responsibilities, even found myself smiling at my coworkers' jokes in a way that felt genuine rather than polite. The hotel booking had been an impulse, but now I realized it was exactly what I needed. A weekend alone, away from the house that suddenly felt contaminated by lies, away from the life I'd been sleepwalking through while everyone else participated in a reality I'd been excluded from. When he walked through the door that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, waiting. He looked tired, maybe even a little nervous, which surprised me. In 9 years of marriage, I'd never seen him look uncertain about anything. "So," he said, dropping his keys on the counter with more force than necessary. "Want to explain the cryptic message and the hotel reservation?" "I saw the photos," I said simply. His face went blank. "What photos?" "From the graduation party. The ones that show her there, participating in the family celebration I was told there wasn't room for." He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched emotions flicker across his face. Surprise, resignation, maybe even relief, like he'd been waiting for this conversation for years. "Look," he finally said, sitting down across from me. "I can explain that. I'm sure you can. I'm curious to hear what the explanation is for lying to me about space limitations while your ex-girlfriend sat at the family table." "She wasn't planned," he said quickly. "She just showed up. You know how she is. She heard about the party and wanted to congratulate my nephew. My mom couldn't exactly turn her away at the door." I nodded slowly. "So when she showed up unexpectedly, you called to let me know there was now room for me too, right? Since the space issue had resolved itself?" The question hung in the air between us. We both knew what the answer was. "It was complicated," he said weakly. "Complicated how? You know how my family is about her. They've known her for over a decade. It would have been awkward to have both of you there at the same time." There it was. The truth I'd been refusing to see for 9 years. It would have been awkward to have both of us there because I wasn't really part of the family. I was the legal wife, the official +1, but she was the one they actually wanted at their celebrations. "So you chose her," I said. "Not a question. I didn't choose anyone. It was easier to avoid the potential drama." "Drama?" I tasted the word. Is that what you call it when your wife wants to attend her nephew-in-law's graduation party? That's not what I meant, and you know it. But I was done pretending to know what he meant. Done filling in the gaps of his explanations with my own rationalizations. Done being understanding about situations that would never require understanding if he actually prioritized our marriage. I'm going to the hotel this weekend, I said. Alone. I need some time to think. About what? I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized I was seeing a stranger. Not because he'd changed, but because I'd finally stopped projecting the man I wanted him to be onto the man he actually was. About what I want the rest of my life to look like. That got his attention. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm tired of being the wife who's understanding about everything except the fact that she's not actually treated like a wife. I stood up, leaving my teacup on the table. I'm going upstairs to pack. We can continue this conversation when I get back from my weekend away, if you want to. Of course I want to continue it. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to something that meant nothing. I paused at the kitchen doorway. If it meant nothing, why didn't you tell me she was there? Why didn't you mention seeing her at all? He didn't have an answer for that, or at least not one he was willing to share. As I packed my bag, I felt lighter with each item I folded. A weekend alone in the mountains suddenly felt like the most luxurious thing I could imagine. No one else's feelings to manage, no social dynamics to navigate, no pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Just me, figuring out what I actually wanted instead of what everyone else expected me to want. It was long overdue. The weekend at the resort was a revelation. I'd forgotten what it felt like to wake up naturally, without an alarm, without immediately thinking about what someone else needed from me. I had spa treatments, took long walks through the mountain trails we'd explored on our honeymoon, and ate dinner alone at the hotel restaurant without feeling self-conscious about it. But most importantly, I thought. Really thought. Without interruption or the need to manage anyone else's emotions. By Sunday afternoon, sitting on the resort's terrace with a glass of wine and a view of the mountains, I'd reached some uncomfortable conclusions. The graduation party wasn't an isolated incident, it was just the most obvious example of a pattern I'd been ignoring for years. I'd been living as a guest in my own marriage. When I got home Sunday evening, he was waiting with flowers and an elaborate dinner he'd cooked himself. Chinese takeout from our favorite restaurant, but he'd transferred it to actual dishes and lit candles. The effort was sweet, but it felt performative rather than genuine. How was your weekend? He asked as I set my bag down. Enlightening, I said honestly. We sat down to eat, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence with cheerful conversation. I let him talk, really listened to what he was saying rather than just waiting for my turn to respond. He told me about his weekend, about work, about plans for the following week. Normal, surface-level conversation that revealed absolutely nothing about what he was actually thinking or feeling about our situation. Finally, I interrupted him. We need to finish the conversation we started before I left. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. I thought maybe the weekend away helped you put things in perspective. It did, just not the perspective you were hoping for. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd screenshotted from the graduation party. I want you to look at these and tell me honestly what you see. He reluctantly took the phone, scrolling through the images with an increasingly uncomfortable expression. When he reached the photo of him standing close to her on the deck, he stopped scrolling. These are just candid photos, he said finally. Everyone looks natural and relaxed in candid photos. That's exactly my point. You look natural and relaxed with her. More relaxed than I've seen you in years. And your family looks completely comfortable with her presence, like it's the most normal thing in the world. She's been part of the family for a long time. Longer than I have. Apparently. He set the phone down and rubbed his face. What do you want me to say? That my family has known her longer? Of course they have. That doesn't mean anything. It means something when they choose her presence over mine at family celebrations. Nobody chose. Stop. I held up a hand. Please stop pretending this was some kind of coincidence or misunderstanding. Your sister called me specifically to disinvite me from a family event. Then your ex-girlfriend attended that same event, participated fully, and was clearly welcomed and comfortable. That's a choice, and it's a choice your entire family made together. The silence stretched between us. He was looking down at his plate, moving food around without eating. What I don't understand, I continued, is why. What is it about her that makes your family prefer her to me? What am I missing? What have I done wrong that makes me the expendable one after 9 years of marriage? When he looked up, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Guilt, yes, but also something that looked almost like pity. You haven't done anything wrong, he said quietly. Then what is it? He took a deep breath. They have more history with her, more shared experiences. It's not personal. Everything about this is personal. Marriage is personal. Family is personal. The fact that they feel more connected to your ex-girlfriend than to your wife is incredibly personal. Look, I know it's complicated. Stop calling it complicated! The words came out sharper than I'd intended. It's not complicated, it's simple. Your family prefers her to me. You're comfortable with that arrangement. I'm tired of pretending that's acceptable. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. What are you saying? I'm saying I deserve better than being the consolation prize in my own marriage. You're not a consolation prize. Then why does it feel like one? Why do I constantly feel like I'm competing for space in your life with someone who's supposed to be your ex? Why do I have to be understanding about her presence while being excluded from family events? He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he had one he wasn't willing to share. I want you to be honest with me, I said. Completely honest. Is there something going on between you and her that I should know about? No, he said immediately. Absolutely not. We're friends. That's all. But something in his voice made me doubt him for the first time in our marriage. A slight hesitation, a defensive edge that hadn't been there before. I want to believe you, I said, but I'm going to need more than your word at this point. The phone call came Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. His mother, her voice artificially bright and cheerful. I wanted to call and apologize about the graduation party mix-up, she said without preamble. I feel terrible that you missed such a special celebration. Mix-up. As if my exclusion had been some kind of administrative error. I appreciate you calling, I said carefully, applying mascara while balancing the phone against my shoulder. You know how crazy these family events can get, trying to coordinate everyone's schedules and accommodate all the logistics. Sometimes things just don't work out the way we plan. I paused with the mascara wand halfway to my lashes. It sounded like the issue was space, not scheduling. Well, yes, space and schedules and you know how it is. But I didn't know how it was, because in 9 years of marriage, I'd never been disinvited from a family event due to space constraints that mysteriously resolved themselves for other people. I saw photos from the party, I said. It looked like a wonderful time. Silence on the other end. Then, oh, yes, it was lovely. She looked like she was having a great time too. Another pause. Longer this time. She's been part of the family for so long. Since she and my son were in college together. Sometimes we don't even think about it, you know? She just shows up and we make room because that's what we've always done. There it was. The truth she probably hadn't meant to reveal. They make room for her because that's what they've always done. It's automatic, natural, unquestioned. Making room for me, apparently, required conscious effort and planning. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. I hope you do. I'd hate for there to be any hard feelings over something so silly. Silly. My hurt was silly. My exclusion was silly. My 9-year marriage was apparently less significant than their automatic impulse to make room for his ex-girlfriend. Of course not, I said. These things happen. But after I hung up, I sat in my car in the work parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. She'd called to apologize, but every word had made it worse. The casual dismissal of my feelings, the way she talked about the ex-girlfriend like she was an unavoidable force of nature, the complete lack of awareness about how inappropriate the entire situation had been. It wasn't just my husband who saw me as secondary. It was his entire family. That evening, I tried to have a normal conversation with him about our days, but I couldn't stop thinking about his mother's phone call. The way she'd described the ex-girlfriend's presence as automatic, unthinking, natural. Your mom called to apologize about the graduation party, I said while we were cleaning up after dinner. Oh, good. I told her she should. She explained that she just automatically makes room for her because she's been part of the family for so long. He stopped loading dishes into the dishwasher. She said that? Those were her exact words. That she shows up and they make room because that's what they've always done. He was quiet for a moment, then resumed loading dishes with more force than necessary. What does that mean for me? I asked. If your family automatically makes room for her, where does that leave me? You're overthinking this. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your family has never stopped considering her part of their inner circle. I'm the legal wife, but she's the emotional family member. That's not true. Then explain it to me. Help me understand why, after 9 years of marriage, your mother still thinks of her as someone who automatically deserves space at family celebrations, while I'm the one who gets disinvited when logistics get complicated. He slammed a plate into the dishwasher harder than necessary. Because they've known her longer. Because she was there for important moments in our family's history. Because relationships don't just disappear when you break up with someone. The raw honesty in his response stunned me. He'd finally said what I'd suspected but never wanted to acknowledge. So their relationship with her is more important than their relationship with me. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. She was there for important family moments. She has history with them. She matters to them in a way that I apparently don't. You matter to them, but not as much as she does. He didn't deny it. He just stood there, hands dripping with dishwater, looking like he wished he could take back everything he'd just said. I think, I said slowly, I'm finally understanding the situation I've been in for 9 years. I've been trying to build a relationship with your family, trying to earn my place, trying to be the good daughter-in-law. But there was never actually space for me to fill. She never left. She's not competing with you. She doesn't have to compete. She already won. That night, lying in bed next to my husband, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I'd been living in the shadow of a relationship that had never actually ended. It had just changed form, become something more subtle and socially acceptable, but it had never truly ended. And everyone knew it except me. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Not the paranoid, jealous kind of attention, but the clear-eyed, investigative kind. I began treating my own life like a mystery I was trying to solve. It started small. I noticed when he stepped out to take phone calls, something he'd always done but that I'd never questioned. I noticed when he checked his phone and his expression changed just slightly before he put it away. I noticed when he mentioned running errands that seemed to take longer than they should have. I wasn't snooping yet, just observing. But observation was revealing patterns I'd been blind to for years. The breakthrough came by accident. He'd left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he ran out to grab coffee, and I was clearing the breakfast dishes when a notification popped up on the screen. A message preview from someone whose name I didn't recognize, but whose profile picture made my stomach drop. It was her. She was using a different name on whatever platform this was, but the photo was unmistakably the blonde woman I'd been told was just a family friend. The message preview was brief. Can't wait to see you this weekend. It's been too long since... The preview cut off there, but it was enough. More than enough. When he came back with coffee, I was sitting at the table, staring at his laptop screen. Expecting any interesting messages today? I asked casually. He glanced at the laptop and his face went pale. What do you mean? There was a notification while you were gone. From someone with a profile picture I recognized. He closed the laptop quickly. It's nothing. Just family group chat stuff. Since when does she message you directly about family things? She doesn't. It was probably just forwarding something funny or... The message said she can't wait to see you this weekend. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched him cycle through possible explanations. Watched him realize that none of them would be believable. Look, he finally said. Sometimes we meet up for coffee. As friends. To catch up. It doesn't mean anything. You meet up for coffee. Regularly. And you've never mentioned this to me. Because I knew you'd react exactly like you're reacting now. How am I reacting? Like you're jealous and paranoid. I laughed, surprising both of us. I'm not jealous or paranoid. I'm married to someone who's been having secret coffee dates with his ex-girlfriend and lying to me about it for God knows how long. They're not secret dates. They're just secret coffee meetings with your ex-girlfriend that you hide from your wife. What would you call them? He didn't have an answer for that. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been meeting up with her regularly? Another long pause. It's not regular, just occasionally when... How long? A few years, he admitted quietly. A few years. So for a significant portion of our marriage, you've been maintaining a secret relationship with your ex-girlfriend. It's not a relationship. It's friendship. Friendship that you hide from your wife isn't friendship. It's deception. I stood up from the table, my coffee forgotten and cold. I want to see your phone. What? Your phone. If this is innocent friendship, you won't mind showing me your messages with her. That's crazy. I'm not going to let you go through my personal messages. Personal messages with your ex-girlfriend that you've been hiding from me for years? They're private conversations. Everyone deserves privacy, even in marriage. Privacy, yes. Secrets about ongoing relationships with ex-partners? No. He clutched his phone protectively. I'm not showing you my messages. That's a line I won't cross. Then I guess we know where your priorities are. I walked upstairs and locked myself in our bedroom, my hands shaking as I processed what had just happened. It wasn't just the secret meetings, though those were bad enough. It was his immediate defensive reaction, his refusal to be transparent, his willingness to prioritize his privacy with her over my peace of mind in our marriage. That afternoon, while he was at work, I did something I'd never done before. I searched his laptop. I told myself I was looking for evidence of what I already suspected, but I was hoping to find proof that I was wrong, that the messages were innocent, that the meetings were rare, that I was overreacting to a friendship that posed no threat to our marriage. What I found was so much worse than I'd imagined. There were messages going back 3 years. Regular messages. Daily messages sometimes. Good morning texts and late-night conversations. Inside jokes and shared memories. Photos I'd never seen before. Not inappropriate photos, but intimate ones. Pictures of them together at the coffee shop, at restaurants, at places I didn't recognize. And then I found the folder, buried in his documents, labeled with an innocuous name that wouldn't attract attention. Inside were photos from years past, including some from our wedding day. But mixed in with those were recent photos. Photos I'd never seen. Photos that told a story I didn't want to believe. Photos of them together, obviously taken by someone else, at locations around town. A hiking trail I'd suggested we explore together, but he'd said he wasn't interested. A new restaurant that had opened downtown, where he'd told me he'd eaten lunch alone during a work break. A local festival I'd wanted to attend, but he'd claimed he was too busy. He'd been too busy because he was already going. With her. The photos showed them comfortable together, natural together, happy together in a way that made my chest tight with recognition. They looked like a couple. They looked like they belonged together. The last photo in the folder was dated just 2 weeks ago. They were sitting on a park bench, and she was leaning against his shoulder while he showed her something on his phone. The picture was taken from a distance, probably by a stranger who thought they looked sweet together. They did look sweet together. They looked right together. And I finally understood that I'd never been competing with a memory or a friendship. I'd been competing with an ongoing relationship that had never actually ended, just gone underground when he married me. The phone was sitting right there on his nightstand, charging, unlocked because he'd just set it down. I'd never violated his privacy before, never felt the need to, but staring at that screen felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. I picked it up. His message history with her was extensive and recent. The last exchange had happened that morning while I was downstairs making breakfast for both of us. "Missing you already," she'd written at 7:23 a.m. "Same here. Last night was perfect." He'd replied at 7:31 a.m., 3 minutes after kissing me goodbye for the day. Last night. Last night when he'd told me he was working late. Last night when I'd eaten dinner alone and gone to bed before he got home. Last night when he'd slipped into bed quietly, smelling like cologne I didn't recognize. I scrolled up through their conversation, my heart pounding harder with each message I read. 3 weeks ago. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. You looked beautiful. A month ago. I hate that we have to be so careful. I wish things were different. 2 months ago. Being with you feels like coming home. 6 months ago. I know this is complicated, but I've never stopped loving you. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. Never stopped loving you. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd just discovered. This wasn't an emotional affair that had developed recently. This wasn't a friendship that had crossed lines. This was a relationship that had been maintained throughout our entire marriage. Our entire marriage had been a lie. With shaking hands, I picked up the phone again and kept scrolling. The messages went back years, an unbroken thread of communication that revealed the true story of my husband's life. A story that included dinner dates, weekend getaways when he claimed to be on work trips, and a level of emotional intimacy that made a mockery of our wedding vows. But it was the photos that destroyed me completely. Photos from places I recognized. The restaurant where we'd celebrated our anniversary last year, except these photos showed him there with her a week later. The hiking trail where we'd taken our Christmas card photo, except here they were in the same spot, kissing while the sun set behind them. The hotel where we'd stayed for our friend's wedding, except this photo was time-stamped for the night before our arrival, showing them in what was clearly the same room we'd later occupied. I was looking at evidence of a parallel relationship that had shadowed our marriage for years. Every special place, every meaningful moment, every memory I thought belonged to us had been shared with her as well. The most recent photos were from last weekend, the weekend I'd spent at the mountain resort thinking about our marriage while he claimed to be catching up on work at home. Instead, he'd been with her. The photos showed them at a beach house I didn't recognize, looking relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen him look in years. In one photo, she was wearing a ring I didn't recognize on her left hand, A simple band that caught the light as she reached for his hand across a dinner table set for two. I screenshotted everything. Every message, every photo, every piece of evidence that proved what I'd suspected, but hoped wasn't true. Then I carefully put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. When he came home that evening, I was sitting in the living room with a glass of wine, waiting for him. "How was work?" I asked conversationally. "Busy day," he said, loosening his tie. "How was yours?" "Enlightening." Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. "Everything okay?" "I have a question for you," I said, "and I'd like you to answer it honestly." He sat down across from me, his expression wary. "Do you love her?" The question hung in the air between us. I watched his face cycle through surprise, panic, and resignation. What kind of question is that? The kind of question a wife asks when she finds evidence that her husband has been maintaining a romantic relationship with another woman. His face went white. "I don't know what you think you found, but I found everything. Messages, photos, evidence of dates and getaways, and a whole other life you've been living behind my back for years." He slumped forward, his head in his hands. "So I'll ask you again," I said calmly. "Do you love her?" When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "I've never stopped loving her." Finally, after 9 years of marriage, 3 years of secret meetings, and God knows how many lies, I was hearing the truth. "Thank you," I said, "for finally being honest with me." He looked shocked by my calm reaction. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, standing up and finishing my wine, "I figure out how to rebuild my life without you in it." I didn't leave the house immediately. That would have been the dramatic thing to do, but I'd learned that drama was less effective than strategy. Instead, I became very, very quiet. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made an appointment with a divorce attorney. Not because I'd definitely decided on divorce, but because I needed to understand what my options were. I needed to know what the landscape looked like before I made any decisions about my future. The lawyer was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. I showed her everything: the screenshots, the evidence of the ongoing relationship, the financial records I'd gathered. She listened without judgment and took careful notes. "How long do you think this has been going on?" she asked. "Based on the messages I found, at least 3 years of regular contact. But honestly, I suspect it never really ended." "And he's admitted to the relationship?" "He admitted he loves her, that he's never stopped loving her." She nodded. "That's helpful. In cases like this, honesty, even painful honesty, usually leads to better outcomes for everyone." We talked about assets, about the house, about my rights and his obligations. The conversation was clinical and practical, which I found oddly comforting. After years of emotional confusion and gaslighting, having someone lay out the facts in clear legal terms felt like breathing fresh air. "What do you want the outcome to be?" she asked finally. "I want my life back," I said without hesitation. "I want to stop living in the shadow of a relationship that was never going to end. I want to stop being the consolation prize." "Then we can make that happen." Over the next 2 weeks, while my husband tried to pretend everything was normal, I quietly documented everything. I photographed financial records, made copies of important documents, and built an airtight case for why this marriage had been fraudulent from the start. But I also did something else. I started investigating their relationship more thoroughly, not out of masochistic curiosity, but because I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. What I discovered was breathtaking in its audacity. They'd been taking trips together for years, always during times when he claimed to be traveling for work. A weekend in the mountains while I thought he was at a conference in the city. A beach vacation while I believed he was visiting his college friend. Even a trip to Europe last year that he'd told me was a solo business trip to clear his head and focus on his career. The photos from that Europe trip showed them in Paris, Rome, Barcelona, all the places I'd dreamed of visiting with my husband someday. Places that were now forever tainted by the knowledge that he'd already been there, with her, making memories I'd never be part of. But it was the financial records that really opened my eyes. A second credit card I'd never known about, used exclusively for their relationship. Restaurant charges, hotel bookings, jewelry purchases that had never made it home to me. Thousands of dollars spent maintaining a relationship that was supposed to be just friendship. Even worse, I found evidence of a joint savings account. Money that should have been going toward our mortgage, our retirement, our shared future, had instead been deposited into an account with both their names on it. They'd been building a financial future together, while I balanced our household budget and worried about whether we could afford a vacation. The account had been opened 2 years ago, just 6 months after we'd had a serious conversation about starting a family. While I'd been taking prenatal vitamins and tracking my cycle, hoping to build a future with him, he'd been literally investing in a future with someone else. The betrayal was so complete, so systematic, that it almost felt abstract. Like I was reading about someone else's life, someone else's naive trust being systematically exploited. But the anger, when it finally hit, was very real and very personal. I'd spent 9 years of my life with a man who'd never been fully present in our marriage. I'd blamed myself for the distance I felt from his family, the sense that I was always performing rather than belonging. I'd questioned my own instincts, my own perceptions, my own worth. When the truth was, I'd been competing against a relationship that was not only ongoing, but was being actively prioritized over our marriage. I'd been set up to fail from the beginning, and then made to feel like the failure was my fault. But now I knew the truth, and I was going to use it. The family dinner was his mother's idea, a Sunday afternoon gathering to clear the air about the graduation party situation and make sure everyone's on the same page going forward. She'd called me directly to extend the invitation, her voice warm and conciliatory. "I really think it would be good for all of us to sit down together," she'd said. "Family is so important, and I hate that there's been any tension." I accepted graciously, even offered to bring dessert. What she didn't know was that I'd been hoping for exactly this opportunity. I spent Saturday afternoon preparing, but not in the kitchen. Instead, I organized all the evidence I'd gathered into a neat folder. Screenshots of messages, photos from their secret dates, bank statements showing the joint account, credit card records of their shared expenses. Everything carefully arranged and printed in chronological order. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at his parents' house with a homemade apple pie and a manila folder that was going to change everything. The whole family was there. His parents, his sister, and her husband. Even his brother who'd driven in from the city. They'd clearly been briefed on the situation because everyone was being exceptionally nice to me, asking about work and complimenting the pie with the kind of forced enthusiasm that suggested they felt guilty about something. We made small talk through appetizers and dinner, everyone carefully avoiding any mention of the graduation party or recent family events. The conversation felt stilted and artificial, like we were all reading from a script. Finally, as we were finishing the main course, his mother cleared her throat. "I wanted to address the elephant in the room," she said, looking directly at me. "I know there was some confusion about the graduation party, and I want to make sure there are no hard feelings going forward." "Actually," I said, setting down my fork, "I'm glad you brought that up. I've been thinking a lot about that situation, and I realized there are some things about this family dynamic that I don't fully understand." I pulled out my folder and placed it on the table. Everyone's attention immediately focused on it. "I discovered something interesting while trying to figure out why I was excluded from the graduation party while she was automatically included," I continued. "It turns out, the reasons are much more complicated than space limitations." His father frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean that what I thought was a friendship between my husband and his ex-girlfriend is actually an ongoing romantic relationship that's been maintained throughout our entire marriage." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched expressions change around the table, surprise from his parents, shock from his siblings, and panic from my husband. "That's not," he started to say, but I held up a hand. "I have evidence," I said calmly, opening the folder. Messages, photos, financial records, years of documentation showing that what everyone has been calling friendship is actually an affair that's been going on for at least 3 years, possibly longer. I passed around copies of the most damaging messages, watching their faces as they read his words to her. The declarations of love, the references to their time together, the complaints about having to hide their relationship. These messages show planning for secret trips, shared financial accounts, and a level of emotional intimacy that makes a mockery of marriage vows, I continued. "But what's most interesting to me is that none of you seem surprised by this information." His mother had gone pale. His sister was staring at the papers in her hands like they might catch fire. "Did you all know?" I asked directly. "Did you know that he's been maintaining a romantic relationship with her while married to me?" The guilty silence was answer enough. "You knew," I said, not a question. "You've all known, and you've been protecting their relationship while treating me like an inconvenience to be managed." "It's complicated," his mother began. "No, it's not complicated. It's simple. You prioritized their relationship over my marriage. You made me feel like an outsider in my own family because you never accepted that their relationship had actually ended." I stood up, gathering my papers. The graduation party wasn't about space. It was about making sure I didn't interfere with their time together. The family gatherings where she's always welcome and I'm often excluded weren't coincidences. They were deliberate choices to protect and nurture a relationship that should have ended the day he married me. "We never meant for you to be hurt," his father said quietly. "But you didn't care if I was hurt, as long as I didn't interfere with what you all wanted, which was for him to be with her instead of me." I looked around the table at these people I'd tried so hard to please, tried so hard to win over, for 9 years. "I need you to understand something," I said. "I'm not angry about being excluded from one party. I'm angry about being excluded from the truth about my own marriage. I'm angry about being made to feel crazy for sensing something was wrong when something was very, very wrong. I'm angry about being gaslit by an entire family who chose to protect his affair rather than respect his marriage vows." I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. "Where are you going?" my husband called after me. "To file for divorce," I said without turning around. "You can all stop pretending to tolerate me now. You'll get exactly what you've always wanted." I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into a hotel downtown and called my lawyer from the lobby. By Monday morning, the divorce papers were being prepared. My husband tried calling, tried texting, even showed up at my office, but I'd said everything I needed to say at that dinner table. The time for conversation had passed years ago, when honesty might have saved our marriage. Now, there was only the business of legally ending what had been emotionally over for longer than I'd realized. The legal process moved faster than I'd expected, partly because the evidence was so overwhelming, and partly because he didn't contest most of my demands. His lawyer advised him not to fight a divorce where adultery could be proven so thoroughly. What surprised me was how quickly his family's attitude changed once the truth was out in the open. His mother called to apologize, but her apology revealed more about their mindset than she probably intended. "We always hoped you two would work things out," she said. "We thought if we just gave it time, he'd realize what he was throwing away." "So you knew about the affair and did nothing to stop it because you hoped it would end naturally?" "We hoped he'd come to his senses. While I remained married to him, unknowing and competing against a relationship you all knew was ongoing. We didn't want to interfere." "You did interfere. You interfered by protecting their relationship at my expense. You interfered by making me feel unwelcome so they could spend time together. You interfered by lying to me about space limitations while accommodating her presence." The conversation ended badly, but I didn't care anymore. Their opinions had stopped mattering to me the moment I realized they'd never actually cared about mine. The financial settlement was more favorable than I'd expected. The secret accounts, the hidden credit cards, the money he'd spent on maintaining his affair, it all worked in my favor when it came to dividing assets. I got the house, a significant portion of his retirement accounts, and enough cash to start over comfortably. But the real victory was psychological. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not the version of myself that was constantly trying to earn approval or fit into spaces where I wasn't wanted, but the person I'd been before. I'd started doubting my own perceptions. 3 months after I filed for divorce, I ran into his sister at the grocery store. The encounter was awkward, but she surprised me by approaching instead of avoiding me. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "For the graduation party. For all of it. You were right to be angry." "Thank you," I said. "That means something. For what it's worth, I think you handled the whole situation with incredible dignity. A lot of people would have made it much messier. Making it messy wouldn't have changed anything. It would have just given you all an excuse to dismiss me as crazy or vindictive." She nodded. "You're probably right. We told ourselves we were staying out of it, but we were really just taking sides. You were protecting the outcome you preferred, even though it meant deceiving me for years." "Yes," she said quietly. "We were, and I'm sorry for that." It was the first genuine apology I'd received from his family, and it came too late to change anything, but not too late to provide some closure. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved in with her. They were living in the beach house where they'd had some of their secret getaways, the one I'd seen in the photos. Apparently, they were planning to get married. The news should have hurt, but instead it felt like vindication. Everything I'd suspected, everything I'd been told I was imagining, everything I'd been made to feel guilty about questioning, it had all been true. They'd been planning a life together while I was married to him. Now they were free to live it openly, and I was free to build something real with someone who actually wanted to be with me. The strangest part was realizing how much energy I'd been spending trying to make a relationship work that was never going to work. Not because we were incompatible, but because he'd never been fully present. Half of his heart had always belonged to someone else, and I'd been trying to build a life with the remaining half. Now I had all of myself back, and for the first time in years, that felt like more than enough. 2 years later, I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop, the one I discovered after the divorce when I was exploring parts of the city I'd never had reason to visit before. It's become my Saturday morning ritual. Coffee, newspaper, and the quiet satisfaction of a life that belongs entirely to me. My phone buzzes with a text from my sister. Saw the engagement announcement in the paper? How are you feeling about it? She's talking about my ex-husband and his ex-girlfriend, who was never really his ex. They made it official last month, apparently, with a small ceremony at the same beach house where they'd conducted their affair. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'm fine, I text back. Actually better than fine. And I mean it. The engagement announcement didn't trigger the sadness or anger I might have expected. Instead, it felt like the final period at the end of a very long, very complicated sentence. He got what he'd always wanted. She got what she'd been working toward for years. His family got the daughter-in-law they'd always preferred. And I got something I hadn't even realized I'd lost, my self-respect. The house I kept in the divorce has become my sanctuary. I've redecorated it completely, erasing every trace of the life I thought I was building with him. The rooms are lighter now, filled with plants and books and artwork I chose because I love it, not because it matches some imaginary vision of what a married couple's home should look like. I've also started dating again, cautiously, but optimistically. There's someone I've been seeing for a few months now, a kind man who thinks my independence is attractive rather than threatening, who doesn't have any ex-girlfriends lurking in the shadows of his family gatherings. It's still early, but there's something refreshing about being with someone whose attention isn't divided, whose affection doesn't feel like it's being rationed. The most unexpected outcome of the divorce has been the friendships I've developed with other women who've been through similar experiences. Women who understand what it's like to have your reality questioned, to be made to feel crazy for noticing what everyone else was working to hide. We meet for dinner once a month, an informal support group that's become one of the highlights of my social calendar. You know what the worst part was? One of them said recently. Not the betrayal itself, but the way everyone acted like I should have seen it coming, like it was my fault for trusting my husband. I understood exactly what she meant. The secondary trauma of being blamed for your own naive trust, of being made to feel stupid for believing what you were told instead of investigating your spouse like a detective. But there's also been unexpected healing in discovering I'm not alone in this experience, that the particular brand of gaslighting that comes with family-supported affairs is more common than I'd realized. As for my ex-husband's family, I've had no contact with them since the divorce, and I prefer it that way. I heard through mutual friends that his mother tried to reach out several times in the first year after the divorce, apparently wanting to maintain a relationship despite everything that had happened. But there was no relationship to maintain. What I'd thought was a relationship had actually been a performance, with me playing the role of the understanding daughter-in-law while they protected the dynamic they actually preferred. The lawyer was right when she said honesty leads to better outcomes. Once everyone stopped pretending, we were all free to live our actual lives instead of the charade we'd been maintaining. He's with the woman he always loved, the woman his family always preferred. They have their beach house and their shared history and their inside jokes that go back decades. And I have something I'd forgotten was possible. A life that's entirely my own, with no hidden agendas or competing loyalties or secret relationships undermining my reality. Sometimes I think about the woman I was 2 years ago, sitting in that kitchen trying to understand why she'd been excluded from a family party. She was so focused on being included that she couldn't see how much energy she was wasting trying to earn a place in a family that had already made their choice. Now I'm focused on building a life with people who choose me first, not as a consolation prize or a legal obligation, but because they genuinely want me there. It turns out that's a much better foundation for happiness than I ever imagined. The coffee shop is getting busy now, filled with couples and families enjoying their Saturday morning routines. I finish my coffee and fold my newspaper, ready to head home to the life I've built from scratch. It's a good life. It's an honest life. And it's completely, authentically mine. That's more than enough. It's everything.